Well, no matter how hard you try, I guess you can't escape your past. I need to remind you what is out there. I struggled for a long time with surviving. No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
The Last of Us released on PlayStation 3 10 years ago today as this video comes out. The game received universal acclaim when it was released, won a wide range of awards particularly for the writing, performances and game direction, and had a cultural impact within and beyond video games that this year culminated in a highly acclaimed HBO adaptation. In this retrospective, we're going to take a look at how the game came to be, talk about what makes it such a fun and compelling experience, examine its ongoing cultural impact, and deep dive into its iconic story. Let's get into it. In 2004, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University who was friends with the legendary film director George A. Romero gave his students an exciting project. They were to create the concept for a video game they could pitch to the director. One of those students was Neil Druckmann, whose idea was to take the gameplay of Ico on the PlayStation 2 and set it during an outbreak like Romero's own Night of the Living Dead, with a character like John Hartigan from Sin City in the lead. Ico sees the titular character, a young boy, escorting Yorda through a 3D platforming environment, having to move objects in the world and help her traverse the levels. Replace a young boy with a grizzled, disenchanted veteran cop and drop zombies into the world, and you can already see the initial blueprint for what became The Last of Us. The other game that fits this mold, of course, is 2005's Resident Evil 4, which was also a significant influence on The Last of Us once the game was being designed. It hadn't yet released in 2004, of course, but a year later it would absolutely rock the gaming landscape and popularise the over-the-shoulder third-person shooter, also influencing other massive titles like Gears of War and Dead Space. Druckmann's pitch in his university project wasn't picked by Romero, and after that it was turned down by an indie publisher after he pitched it as a 6-issue comic book called The Turning. It's important to note that whilst this initial story evolved into The Last of Us, there was still a lot to be ironed out. Druckmann himself acknowledges that one initial pitch of the game, known as Mankind, was misogynistic. In that version, the cordyceps would have exclusively affected women, making Ellie the only immune female. The problem, of course, being that this would lead to a game where you play as a man tasked with killing women over and over. Ellie was also at one point supposed to be mute, like Yorda in Ico, with their relationship with Joel evolved entirely through gameplay mechanics and without dialogue. Thankfully, this too fell by the wayside to give us Ashley Johnson's iconic performance. Druckmann joined Naughty Dog in 2004, and whilst working as a designer on the first 2 Uncharted games, he worked through the idea for his story with Bruce Straley, the game director for Uncharted 2. As well as iterating on the basic story idea as we've discussed, Straley and Druckmann were also fascinated by the cordyceps fungus after seeing the 2006 BBC Nature documentary Planet Earth. This led to a version of infected human apart from what we were used to seeing in zombie fiction, and iconic enemies like clickers and bloaters. Preliminary production on The Last of Us, under the codename Project Thing and T1, began in October 2009. This was the first time that Naughty Dog had split its staff into 2 teams, with Uncharted 3 in development at the same time. Straley was selected to lead as game director based on his experience, whilst Druckmann's design talent, which he had demonstrated to Naughty Dog co-president Evan Wells outside of his initial job as a programmer, saw him taken on as creative director a year into production. He would initially have been working with Gordon Hunt as motion capture director, who had taken on the role in the Uncharted games, until the studio realised that the game would require a different tone and so looked for a new director. Druckmann was inspired to take the role on himself when researching it in preparation for interviews. Eric Pangilian and Nate Wells served as art directors, utilising photos of real-world disasters such as Hurricane Katrina to design a world that Straley described as not just decay and rot and post-apocalyptic grey, but a human world. whilst lead character artist Michael Noland used reference photos from fungal diseases and built them into a human character model to create the now iconic look of The Last of Us' infected. In writing the script and building the world, Druckmann and the Naughty Dog team took influence from real-world events such as the polio epidemic of the 1880s and the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, as well as The World Without Us by Alan Weisman, which documents the likely effect on natural and built environments if humans were to disappear. The characters in the game evolved with input from the actors. Ashley Johnson made Ellie stronger and more defensive than originally written, whilst Troy Baker evolved Joel from Josh Brolin's character in No Country for Old Men to someone more emotional and who cared for Tess, albeit in an understated and reserved way. Tess, too, evolved from initially being the main antagonist to being Joel's partner, and the script read-through inspired Druckmann to make Bill's sexuality less vague than initially written, with a few additional lines. Developing the gameplay required the creation of a new engine to accommodate the game's AI, not only the enemies, both human and infected, but also the companions and primarily Ellie. Enemy NPCs were designed to make random choices and adapt the tactics they use to attack the player, including reacting differently depending on the weapon the player has, whilst Ellie would remain close to Joel in order to not be seen as a burden on the player. In designing the combat, the developers omitted the traditional cover system seen in most third-person shooters in order to incentivize players to keep moving and to utilize stealth. Survival horror games were a significant inspiration for limiting the supplies available to the player, working with the stealth system to create a sense of desperation and forcing tactical choices over combat, stealth, and resource management. The game's sound design didn't reuse any assets from previous games, and so they created entirely new sounds. They did so with a view to create a naturalistic and minimalistic soundscape in order to heighten tension. Alongside this, composer Gustavo Santaolalla, who cannot read or write sheet music and so simply records, worked from early in development to create the game's score. He described a lot of his work on the game as producing sound that was textural and not necessarily melodic. As a finished product, The Last of Us is a fantastic looking game for its time. It of course received a graphical overhaul in the 2022 remake, but for a game released in 2013 at the end of the PlayStation 3 era, it still looks remarkably good. Most notable is the already referenced lack of uniform greyness so common in post-apocalyptic games. The cracked pavement of the Boston quarantine zone quickly falls away to the rich spring textures of Bill's town, the deep waterlogged greens of Pittsburgh in the summer, and the crisp white of the Colorado winter. The environments of the game are as alive as its civilization is dead. Even with those PS3 era graphics, The Last of Us is able to evoke the hardness of human survival and the gentleness of re-emerging nature. The sound design brings the levels alive, feeding into the deep emotion of the story and the high tension of the combat, underlined by the power of Gustavo Santaolalla's music. Without all of this, the best story in the world would fall flat, and so it's lucky that it's all here, because for that, The Last of Us is certainly a contender. But before we get to the story, let's talk about the gameplay. The Last of Us is primarily discussed in terms of its narrative, but it is still a video game, and though this is overlooked by many, the way it plays is still a vital part of the experience, and one that I've found fun and engaging enough to put well over 300 hours into, between the PS4 remaster and the PS5 remake. The general gameplay loop of The Last of Us is successive sandbox stealth combat set pieces, interspersed with environmental traversal puzzles and looting. As the story is primary, there are a number of forced walking sequences where you're basically pushing forward whilst dialogue happens. There is an argument that these could be cutscenes, or at least skippable, and I find myself agreeing with that at least when I'm doing challenge runs. However, there is the counterpoint that these are few and feed into the more frequent moments of in-gameplay character interaction where you're still able to move a lot more freely and can still control the pace of these moments to a degree. We'll talk about this more when I go into discussing the story. On the gameplay side, I will say that they help the pacing in coming after or ahead of really intense combat moments, and even when I can do without the forced walking, the challenge runner in me appreciates the moments to breathe. The traversal puzzles are never overly complex, generally a case of moving a large object to a place where you can stand on it, or using a plank as a bridge. The main benefit this has to the gameplay, aside from boosts, shimmies and movable barriers disguising environmental loading, is to establish a sense of place in a more interesting way than simply walking for a long time. You get the chance to get loot, breathe before the next fight, and in the meantime the environmental storytelling and note artifacts tell you this is a real place where real people lived their lives before becoming the creatures or enemies you have to kill. As for the combat, that lack of a traditional third-person shooter cover system mentioned earlier does push you towards continual movement and stealth. Combined with the limited resources that the game provides, including the player's limited capacity for ammo of each type, This creates a sense of desperation, so that you really do feel as though every bullet counts. Joel here isn't Solid Snake, nor a character from Gears of War. Instead, he's a Viet Cong, scraping together what he can, going loud to clear a path, then disappearing into the shadows to avoid being flanked. This won't ring any bells with a lot of players, though, who, like the first time I played the game, will have spent their time crouch walking around each area, strangling all the enemies before walking on to the next when the dialogue cue told them everyone was dead. The weakness of The Last of Us' combat design is that although it incentivizes the guerrilla warfare style to a degree on normal, there's enough leeway that you can get through in a slower, stealthier way that a lot of players will find boring. It's only when you knock the difficulty up to hard, survivor or grounded, the highest difficulty, which in my view best complements the combat systems on offer, that being overcautious is punished as much as being too reckless, and the gameplay really shines. This is something that Part 2 and the remake both fixed to a huge degree, with massively improved human enemy AI that genuinely feels like it's playing against you even without the added aggression of higher difficulties. Not that normal difficulty on the original or remaster can't be fun, and of course higher difficulties aren't for everyone, just that the sandbox approach to combat is likely why a lot of players will have had no need to play the game with Joel as a guerrilla fighter, and therefore see the game as one with an incredible story, but mostly forgettable gameplay. That's not their fault, as it's the game's job to push the player into a certain playstyle rather than the player's job to guess the developer's intentions. What I will say in Naughty Dog's favour here is that they did extremely well with the challenge levels across easy to grounded. A lot of games will simply have easy difficulty be a virtually indestructible player taking on fodder enemies, and ultra hard be a glass-boned player versus the ultimate bullet sponges. But The Last of Us' difficulty progression focuses on resource availability, enemy aggression and awareness, and ally passivity. Humans and lesser infected still die to a headshot on grounded, or on very easy it's still a bad idea to let them flank or swarm you by not playing smart. If you can beat the game on one difficulty, then you can step up to the next and feel the difference but still take it on, and so on up to grounded. It offers a genuine progression and learning curve, the way well done difficulty settings should, rather than an impassable wall between easy mode and elite players. And of course in the sequel and the remake, the addition of fully customizable difficulty and a full suite of accessibility options only improves on that. There are only 2 mandatory boss fights in the game, but the gameplay serves the story well, and this isn't a game that lends itself to ending in an ultimate confrontation. The infected aren't the real enemy here, which is why the majority of encounters are with humans, and there's no one ultimate antagonist for Joel to take on in a sword fight like Drake taking on Rafe at the end of Uncharted 4. How the game does end instead gives you the toughest and most intense combat encounter of the game, at least the first time you play, and moments far more powerful than the death of any boss. Which brings us neatly back around to the story. On a superficial level, The Last of Us tells a story that we've heard many times before. 2, in fact. A zombie-style outbreak renders the world a ruin, turning mankind back to savagery, and their only hope lies in the one person who is immune and must be safely transported for a cure. An old broken man with a violent past is redeemed by his surrogate parental relationship with a bright-eyed and optimistic youth. But neither narrative unfolds exactly as we expect it to, and in any case it's not the plot that holds our attention but the characters. The Clickers are incredibly unique and terrifying creatures, but we aren't here for their lore. We're here for Ellie breaking down Joel's emotional barriers and showing him that caring for another isn't a weakness, even in a world as cold and hard as this one. There are lots of questions to be asked around the cure and whether it really can save our species, but the answers to those don't matter so much as the sadness behind Ellie's bright eyes and the truth of what drives her on. The Last of Us isn't considered one of the best video game stories of all time because of the apocalypse and the cure, but because of how well realised its characters and the world they inhabit are. Every single performance from the voice and mocap actors is fantastic, drawing you into every moment with a real sense of urgency and ensuring you feel the emotional weight they're conveying. The dialogue is stripped bare of rousing speeches and exposition in favour of something that feels far more natural, not only in how jealously the characters guard their feelings and intent, but in the way real people talk over and past each other rather than waiting for their cue. The story shows rather than tells you what is going on with a subtlety that few other games have mastered. This is only emphasised by the way the gameplay feeds into the story. Even though characters are the focus, the world is still expertly built, not just through the notes you find scattered, but also the impact the authors of those notes leave on the environment, the dialogue of the enemies when they're unaware of your presence, and even in many cases the placement of infected whose identity when alive is clear enough if you pay attention. Then there's the character interaction as you move through the world. Joel's relationships with Ellie, Tess, Bill and Tommy are fleshed out beyond the cutscenes in how they interact with one another as you pass from point A to point B. Where some games will have the characters spell out the answers to puzzles or clumsily exposit on the next plot point, here the characters still have real conversations. There's far more character history revealed in Joel's answering vaguely or shutting down a question than would be in a speech detailing everything we might need to know. That subtlety, ambiguity, and willingness to leave the details up to the player's imagination work to the story's strength all the way through, but nowhere is its impact more felt than in one of the best endings to any video game, or now, season of TV, ever. Discussing that ending, and everything that leads up to it, of course means spoilers. So if you've not yet experienced the story of The Last of Us, then you may wish to avoid this part until you have, and there are timestamps in the description to help you jump to the remainder of the video. The story of the show follows the same basic beats as the game, however there are differences and divergences, so be aware that although you'll know how it ends, having seen the show doesn't mean there's nothing to spoil before then. Watch on at your own risk. The game opens with Sarah Miller, asleep on a couch in front of the TV, being roused by the voice of her father Joel. He's on the phone to his brother Tommy, and in just a couple of beats of dialogue that do no explaining, we know exactly who Joel is. A working class Joe taking whatever jobs he can in order to support him and his daughter. Despite the unspoken grievances with his current job, he doesn't want to complain and risk losing income. The subsequent exchange with Sarah reveals more. There's no mother in sight, so Sarah is mostly left to fend for herself while Joel is working. But this does nothing to dim her affection and admiration for him, and the two are friends. Neither spell this out, but it is written all over their interactions.
What's this?
Your birthday? You kept complaining about your broken watch. So I figured, You like it?
Honey, it's
What?
nice, but I think it's stuck. It's not...
What? No. Oh, ha ha.
Where did you get the money for this?
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs.
Oh, good. You started helping out with the mortgage then.
Immediately, we are connected to the pair and invested in them as father and daughter. Once Sarah is awoken by a call from her uncle Tommy, who sounds worried but is cut off when the phone goes dead, we can see more of this in the prologue's artifacts. The birthday card Sarah forgot to give Joel spells out the nature of their relationship more explicitly, but isn't necessary as it has already been so well set up. Also available to find is a newspaper that reports on rising hospital admissions and the recall of food products from stores, hinting at what is happening in the wider world. We see it for ourselves when we go into Joel's room and a news broadcast shows a gas leak which becomes an explosion. And that same explosion shakes the house and sends up a plume of smoke visible outside the window. Whatever is happening, it's close. Downstairs, Sarah can find Joel's phone filled with text and missed calls from Tommy. Outside, a barking dog is violently cut short. But Sarah's rising panic is abated by Joel reappearing in the office, albeit only for a moment.
Does anyone come in here?
No, who would come in here?
Don't go near the doors. Just stand back there.
Dad, you're kind of freaking me out. What's going on?
It's the Coopers. Something ain't right with them. I think they're sick.
What kind of sick?
The sudden intrusion of that single infected, Jimmy Cooper, turns confusion and worry into outright fear. Joel moves quickly to calm Sarah and get her away from danger. No long-winded explanation or rationalization, just the fact that they need to move because something bad is happening. In the same way as Sarah, the player can fill in the blanks. That single moment shattering the tension as clear as any high-octane set piece with an infected horde. Normal life has been overtaken. We must flee. In the car, as Sarah, you get to look at your surroundings and see others packing up to leave and various signs of panic on the streets. In your typical zombie story, this will be the moment the characters hear a scene-setting monologue on the radio, perhaps some explanation for why this is happening. Or here the radio is dead, and the only reference to the cause is the implication that only those in the city are sick. Jamie wait in the city as a way to assuage Sarah's worries. Throughout the entire sequence, what we see is Joel's role as a protector. In the car, Sarah is not in physical danger for the moment, but he still shields her from Tommy's panicked talk about gory news reports, from worry that she might be infected, and from even worry about anybody else. When Tommy hopes Lewis escaped his burning farm, Joel says he's sure he did. When they leave behind another family with a child, Joel insists someone else will come along. He doesn't believe that, his decision being driven only by the need to protect his daughter at all costs and strangers posing a risk to that in the current situation. But he is even trying to protect Sarah from worry about the consequences of keeping her safe. The car journey ends abruptly in a collision, and with Sarah having hurt her ankle, the player as Joel must now carry her to safety. In this sequence there are infected, and if you take a wrong path they will bite you, but more of the chaos comes from fleeing people falling over one another. and getting in your way, and the collisions and explosions of panicked drivers losing control. Immediately, though we cannot disregard the infected threat, we are learning that the human reaction to it is at least as dangerous. This culminates in the soldier who stops Joel and Sarah, only briefly protesting his orders to shoot them. Sarah is killed, and even though we haven't known her very long, the game has established their relationship well enough with just a few interactions that we feel the pain of Sarah's loss almost as keenly as Joel does. It's only then, at the hands of a human with a gun rather than infected, that the world ends for Joel.
Sarah! Baby! Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Come on. No. No. No, no. Please. Please don't. Please.
20 years later, we reunite with Joel in the Boston quarantine zone, where he's a black market smuggler along with his partner Tess. He arrives at his apartment having been jumped by men working for a rival smuggler called Robert, who's stolen their shipment of guns, and the pair set out to find him and recover their merchandise. Both Joel's changed demeanour and role in the world and the hard situation of the QZ are established through very natural dialogue between Joel and Tess, neither of them offering additional exposition purely for the player's benefit, and some well-done environmental storytelling. We see an unmoving ration line filled with disgruntled, hungry people, and further up, Pedro herding suspected fireflies out of a building before killing one who turns out to be infected. Taking the time to wander over the other civilians and hear their conversations further underlines the injustice of the military regime, whilst the conversation between soldiers tells us that Fedra's grip is precarious and few other QZs remain intact. When one of the civilians berates Joel for staring, his friend's panicked apology also speaks volumes of Joel's own reputation.
Hey, asshole, what are you looking at?
Ronnie, shut the fuck up. Hey, Joe, we're not looking for trouble, okay?
No harm, no foul.
What the hell's wrong with you? Do you know what that is?
Joel and Tessa's attempt to pass through a checkpoint on their way to Robert is foiled by an ill-timed firefly attack, and they're forced instead to use their smuggler's tunnels to go outside the wall. The journey gives hints to an underlying romantic aspect to the pair's relationship, and we learn of the spores that dead infected leave behind, necessitating gas masks. Finally, we reach the slums that demonstrate the rock bottom of life in the QZ, eating rats, bartering and trading for necessities, and living on edge in case of the slightest provocation. Everyone is oppressed by the military dictatorship, but even so there's still an underclass who are worst off. This leads Joel and Tess towards the docks, and confrontations with Robert's men quickly lead into violence. Both are extremely capable killers, and even with a multitude of enemies in their way, they will not be stopped reaching Robert by any means necessary. When they do, his initial bluster very quickly disappears, and we see how much he fears the pair. For good reason, as Joel quickly demonstrates that he's more than capable of inflicting pain in order to make Robert talk. The violence is harsh but dispassionate, born of necessity rather than pleasure. Joel isn't a sadist, but nor does he flinch from what he needs to do, and this is only a hint of the violence balled up inside him, as we will see later. Tess, equally unflinching, kills Robert in a moment once she learns that he's sold their guns to the Fireflies and is of no use to them. He barely even looks at him as she does, Robert becoming an afterthought even as her bullet pierces his skull. Now a wounded Marlene arrives. The leader of the Fireflies is also looking for Robert, and finding him dead, she opts to use Joel and Tess instead, offering their guns back with more if they do the smuggling that Robert was initially to be contracted for. In this interaction, without it being spoken aloud, we can see that there's history between the trio, but not any love lost. Still, they flee from the approaching military to see the cargo Marlene once smuggled. Before we get there, we pass a building that housed Fireflies being blown up and a group of Fireflies being executed by Fedra. The military may not be in good shape beyond Boston, but nor are their enemies, telling us that beyond the walls of the QZ, it's not either faction which rules, but chaos. This will be made explicit later on, but the implication that will continue to grow throughout the game is clear enough. The world is all but doomed, and there's no truly safe space left. The cargo Marlene wants smuggling is, of course, Ellie. We first meet her as she pulls her switchblade on Joel, thinking he's attacking Marlene. Throughout the entire next scene, her front is up, as she first insists on staying if Marlene cannot go with them, and acts suspicious of Joel. That this is bluster above all is hinted at as she pleads softly to Marlene before being overruled. Joel, for his part, also wants nothing to do with smuggling a kid out of the city. We already know the likely reason for Joel's reluctance, as does Tess, since she makes a point of insisting that Ellie is nothing but cargo, perhaps reassuring him that there's no reason for attachment or concern. Also of note here is that the reason Marlene knows Joel is through Tommy. He was a firefly, but there's perhaps more to it than that, as Marlene hints at with her choice of words when Joel taunts her about his brother.
Was that before or after he left your little militia group?
He left you too.
Ellie and Joel then travel alone to the North Tunnel, their dialogue laced with mild antagonism. Ellie questions him at each moment, and Joel's answers are clipped and curt, him seeming annoyed above all else to be saddled with her. Though in the same way that we've already seen a hint of vulnerability behind Ellie's facade, we here get a brief peek beyond Joel's walls too. When he asks her where her parents are and why she's not in school, he responds to her refusal to say why they're smuggling her by claiming not to care why. But after awaking from a bad dream, which Ellie comments on, he softens when she mentions that she's never been this close to the outside.
I mean, look how dark it is. Can't be any worse out there. Can it?
What on earth do the Fireflies want with you?
This moment is interrupted, and Joel's walls are restored by Tessa's return, and they're readying up to go beyond the wall. But even this early, we're seeing something else in Joel than just the hard shell he presents. A hint that it isn't that he doesn't care after losing Sarah 2 decades ago, but that he's afraid to. Beyond the wall, a confrontation with Federal soldiers reveals that Ellie was bitten and is immune to infection. Joel doesn't want to believe it, but any further questioning is cut short by the arrival of more soldiers. In the confrontation, we see Ellie knife the soldier out of what is quickly revealed to be a fear of them discovering her secret about being bitten. But we get a further glimpse beyond her walls as well, and she recoils in horror when Joel and Tess kill the guards, having naively believed that they would simply hold them up. Throughout further gameplay, we'll hear Ellie reacting shocked when Joel is particularly violent against humans or infected, further illustrating that whatever she has gone through and however tough she acts, she's not accustomed to killing. She is, after all, still only a kid. After escaping Fedra, the three get a further chance to discuss Ellie's condition. Joel remains annoyed and cynical, while to his disbelief, Tess starts to question if the immunity could actually be true. He points to the outskirts and invokes the threat that lurks in the distance, and we see again that he remains afraid to let down his walls, including, now, the hope of a better future. With clickers in the distance, hope literally means walking into danger. On their way to the Capitol building, the trio fight their way through infected and broken skyscrapers and a collapsed subway. During a breather between encounters, Tess suggests taking it easy for a while after this mission, to which Joel responds in disbelief. Tess is not only questioning if a cure is possible now, but hoping for it, seeing the potential of a life that offers more than just surviving and moving on job to job. Joel's guard remains up, however. After narrowly escaping an infected attack in the museum, they reach a rooftop overlooking the Capitol building. As Tess urges them on, Joel hesitates, first watching Ellie, then letting his gaze drift to his watch. As just like before they left the city, we see beyond his defences into the care he is frightened to let form. And once again, it's Tess who pulls him back to the mission, insisting that he stay focused. This time, Joel seems actively annoyed at the intrusion. But whatever he was feeling, it becomes apparent that Tess's hope has become desperation. She was bitten and has to confront her own mortality, and in turn the life she has led.
What are we doing here? This is not us.
What do you know about us? About me?
I know that you are smarter than this.
Really? Guess what? We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
It's Ellie who realises Tess is infected. But even as Tess looks at the progress of her own bite as proof of Ellie's immunity, Joel sees only the evidence of where foolish hope leads. Anger overtakes him as a way to shut down his grief and his fear, and although he does for a moment try and insist that he fight the incoming Fedra soldiers with Tess, he quickly lets his survival instinct take over, lead himself and Ellie to safety. Once they're away from enemies, Ellie tries to console him about Tess and he shuts her down. Whatever was peeking through before they left Boston and overlooking the Capitol is buried again. There was affection between him and Tess, if not always outwardly expressed, and it led to loss. It led to loss because she allowed herself to hope and in turn got bitten. His walls remain his only defense against feeling that pain again, the only way to smother the grief with anger now, and so he lays down a barrier against letting Ellie in.
Here's how this thing's gonna play out. You don't bring up Tess. Ever. Matter of fact, we just keep our histories to ourselves. Secondly, don't tell anybody about your condition. They think you're crazy, they'll try to kill you. And lastly, you do what I say when I say it. We clear?
Sure.
Repeat it.
What you say goes.
A few miles from Boston, the town of Lincoln has just one occupant in the form of Bill. As he owes Joel some favours, this is their best chance of getting a car. On the way into town, Ellie first remarks that she's never walked through the woods before, then stops and gasps in wonder as she encounters fireflies. These moments serve to remind us that she's just 14 and that, despite her bravado, she's led an incredibly sheltered life within the QZ. But Joel insists that he couldn't get back into Boston if he wanted to, so they're stuck together for now. Despite the resignation with which he declares this, and his earlier anger, he's still watching out for Ellie. He's wary of boosting her over the fence to get them into town, despite it being their only option, and eager to keep her close. But still he keeps his distance emotionally, not shutting her down, but also not really engaging with her conversations about gnomes and fairies, video games, or learning to whistle. Ironically, it's Bill who sees through Joel's attempts to keep his distance almost immediately.
Look, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. A partner. Somebody I had to look after. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing. Getting you killed. So you know what I did? I wisened the fuck up. And I realized it's gotta be just me.
Bill, it ain't like that. It's
bullshit. It is just like that. Hey! What'd I say to you when we walked down the steps? What'd I say?
I'm just fixing your stupid pile.
Don't touch. God damn it. You keep babysitting long enough and eventually it's gonna blow up in your face.
Bill in this chapter represents the extremes of Joel's desire to protect himself from harm by closing himself off. Not only does he live alone in a town wired up with traps, which Joel and Ellie have to navigate to reach him, nearly meeting their end when Joel is strung up upside down, but he explicitly offers up his view that the infected are nowhere near as scary as normal people. Bill's worldview is informed, at least in part, by the fact that his partner Frank abandoned him and left him alone. Because it's a lot more genuinely held than Joel's, he notices how much Joel cares for Ellie despite his pretenses. Joel's sternness with Ellie, as she argues with Bill, has the air of an exasperated father rather than a begrudging babysitter. He tries to shield her from looking at burned corpses, fusses as she goes through a doggy door to cut a rope holding the door shut, and calls her name to run when the infected attack. The three cross town to the high school in pursuit of a car battery, which they find stolen before having to fight a bloater to escape. In a nearby house, they find Frank's corpse. He's been bitten and hung himself to avoid turning. Bill quickly buries his own grief in anger, much as Joel did with Tess, though when Joel presents him with Frank's suicide note, which expresses how Frank grew to loathe Bill, the anger in his voice cracks with sorrow. Rather than protect himself, Bill's worldview drove away the one person he cared about, and he clings onto the idea that it's connection rather than isolation that's dangerous. Where Bill is buried deep in the walls he's built up, Joel's walls are again showing cracks. He tells Ellie before they jumpstart the car, which Frank had stolen the battery for and repaired on his ill-fated trip, that she's doing a good job. In his final conversation with Bill, he praises her again, and Bill once again sees through Joel's facade.
That girl nearly got us killed.
You gotta admit, she did hold her own back there.
You ain't gonna make it.
Joel and Bill part ways for likely the last time, and in doing so, Joel commits to the journey away from becoming Bill. Once on the road, Ellie reveals that she's stolen some of Bill's possessions. A comic book, which she bemoans having a cliffhanger ending, a cassette tape, and a gay porn magazine. The latter leads to one of the funniest moments in the game, as Ellie teases a shocked Joel before throwing it away. This and the transition from Ellie saying how she's not tired to being asleep in the seat shows how comfortable she's grown with Joel. And as she sleeps, Joel has a lot to muse on. The barriers he has built up at war with the clear affection he has for the girl. This is all interrupted in Pittsburgh by a violent ambush, and the pair find themselves trapped in an overrun former QZ now dominated by hunters, killing and stealing to survive, having rid themselves not only of Fedra but also of the Fireflies who helped them rise up. Pittsburgh represents the worst of mankind and the justification for both Joel and Bill's closed-off, distrustful demeanours. People are savage and will turn on you if it benefits them. But where Bill's isolation brought him to this view, as well as having to fend off raiders, Joel hasn't just seen the darkest aspects of humanity, he's lived it. When Ellie asks him how he knew to expect an ambush, he answers only that he's been on both sides.
So, you kill a lot of innocent people? I'll take that as a yes.
Take it however you want.
But even with unanswered questions about Joel's past and a city filled with violent sociopaths, there's time amidst the carnage for levity. Ellie not only stays fiercely by Joel's side, but actively retains her sense of humour. She pulls out her joke book at multiple points to lighten the mood.
What is the leading cause of divorce in long-term marriages? A stalemate.
That's awful.
You're awful.
Do you even understand what that means?
Nope. Doesn't matter.
And when they survive particularly fraught encounters, she likens it to action from a comic book.
I was too damn close.
The edge of the universe and back. Endure and survive.
Excuse me?
Savage Starlight. That comic I've been reading? That's what the hero says after a big battle.
Endure and survive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man. Endure and survive.
What? Oh, the comic book thing.
Amidst all of the danger and violence, Ellie is still a child, and this is most explicit when she saves Joel from a hunter by shooting him. Joel, initially startled, chastises her for disobeying his orders, and his anger means he doesn't give her the assurance she's looking for that what she did was necessary. It was the first time she'd killed anyone, and Joel's anger meant that she didn't have the time to process it in the moment. However, their situation soon makes him realise that he cannot protect her from being part of the battle. He trusts her to cover him with a rifle, and then later gives her a pistol to use in emergencies only. If his reluctance to give her a gun came of a misguided desire to protect her innocence, now instead he shows her that he trusts her, and recognises that she can look after herself as the best way for him to protect her. Where Joel's departure from Bill's town was him starting to move away from Bill's isolationist mindset, this is the moment that Joel and Ellie truly become a team, perhaps even family. Soon, the pair encounter brothers Henry and Sam. Mistaking each other for hunters, Joel and Henry fight until Sam pulls a gun on them. Joel is wary of trusting them, but Henry recognises that the hunters don't keep children around, and Ellie pushes Joel towards working with the pair to escape the city. Ellie and Sam bond quickly, being of a similar age. However, Ellie is not only surer of herself, but also given more leeway by Joel than Sam is by Henry, and so she takes on a big sister role. When Henry won't let Sam take a toy robot, Ellie grabs it to give it to him later, and she constantly tries to put Sam at ease, even as Henry's overprotectiveness makes him anxious and fearful. Though her loyalty remains with Joel, as we see in the final escape from Pittsburgh when Sam takes Henry and runs away because they don't have a way to help Joel up, but Ellie jumps back down to be by his side. In turn, when they reach a dead end on a broken bridge, Joel is willing to risk almost certain death against an armoured truck because Ellie can't swim. But the pair's bond is so strong now that Ellie jumps to force Joel to jump after her and keep her afloat, meaning the two can be rescued by Henry, who hadn't completely abandoned them. Joel is angry, but the four stay together as a group. A battle through infested sewers leads to a suburb where a sniper attacks them on sight. Get out! Joel manages to take out the sniper and the hunters who arrive in pursuit, but then infected swarm the place and the four barely make it out alive. Unbeknownst to them, Sam is bit. Whilst Joel and Henry bond, Sam broods and counts up the food supplies they've scavenged. Ellie brings him the toy she stole, but he cannot be consoled and voices his fear of being infected and trapped in his own body. Ellie responds with her own fear of being alone, which we'll come back to, but here I want to dwell on the tragedy of Sam's life. His brother tried so hard to protect him, with a fierceness that was reflected in a strictness and lack of trust for Sam to be alone. However understandable this may be, it was also the root of Sam's fears and insecurities, and why in sharp contrast to Ellie he appears almost constantly terrified of the situations he finds himself in. And rather than escape, getting out of the city only meant the thing he feared most came to pass, in turn leading Henry to kill him and take his own life, having failed his one purpose of keeping his little brother safe. Just as Bill serves as a lesson for Joel, showing the end result of closing himself off, so Henry shows Joel what it is to not be able to protect the ones you care for. Joel has already faced this lesson with the loss of Sarah, but a conversation in Pittsburgh hints that unlike Henry, Joel could not follow through with suicide, which leaves no option for him to fail. Not again. This culminates in the decision that Joel takes once he finds his brother Tommy. Despite his closeness to Ellie and the lessons of Bill and Henry, he remains fearful of letting anybody in. When he finds the child's grave, Ellie remarks that she forgot to put the robot on Sam's grave, and Joel shuts her down.
Ellie.
What? I want to talk about it.
No.
Why not?
How many times do we need to go over this? Things happen, and we move on.
It's just...
That's enough.
You're right. I'm sorry.
So when they reach the dam outside of Jackson and find Tommy along with his wife Maria restoring the hydroelectric power, he takes the decision to ask Tommy to take Ellie the rest of the way. He justifies this as him being better placed to find the Fireflies, but at this point the weight of how close he and Ellie have gotten, and of the possibility of losing her, is heavy on his mind. Tommy is reluctant, and the fight they have reveals their differing views of Joel's past actions to keep them alive. This speaks to the rift between them and why Tommy joined the Fireflies, but also what Jackson now represents. In Joel's worldview, Pittsburgh represents what humanity has become, but in Tommy's it is Jackson, not a band of violent raiders murdering to live, but a self-sufficient, cooperative community. Tommy changes his mind when seeing Joel and Ellie interact after a bandit raid, realizing the care his brother has for the girl and what she represents. So he agrees to take her to the Fireflies. But Ellie, realizing Joel's intent, steals a horse and runs off. Where Joel and Tommy catch up with Ellie is one of the most powerful, emotionally charged scenes in the game. Ellie lays bare her own truth, which goes back to what she told Sam of her fear of ending up alone. She had allowed herself to grow close to Joel, and now he too is abandoning her, leaving her on her own once more. Yet still wrestling with feelings he's buried for 2 decades, he responds only by lashing out at her rather than taking on board what she's saying.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad. And we are going our separate ways.
On the ride back to Jackson, Joel keeps his distance from Ellie, deep in thought, but he finally relents as they sit overlooking the town, realizing the depth of his connection and wanting to stay with Ellie and protect her. By the time they reach the university, Joel is starting to open up. He talks to Ellie about having Sarah young and not going to university as a result. The subject of Sarah's mother is a step too far, but Joel stops the conversation gently rather than abruptly. He also tells Ellie he wanted to be a singer. But there are no Fireflies to be found, as they've moved to Salt Lake City, and the pair are attacked by raiders. They fight their way through, but Joel is seriously wounded, and Ellie has to lead him to safety. Joel clings on stubbornly until Ellie says they've gotten away, at which point he falls off the horse. Winter comes and Ellie is alone, hunting a deer through the forest. This leads her to a cabin where she's confronted by 2 strange men, David and James. Ellie is immediately distrustful of them both, and James returns the favour, but David presents a kindly face. He offers to trade her for deer meat, and Ellie asks for antibiotics, revealing to the player that Joel is still alive. Though she doesn't know it yet, she's also revealing information to David. David is the leader of a group based in Silver Lake Resort, who eat human meat to survive. They were also the ones who attacked Joel and Ellie at the university and want revenge for their dead. But David's intentions in this chapter are far more sinister. I've previously made a video talking about how David is, in essence, a dark mirror of Joel. Both present themselves as protectors for Ellie, but where Joel took the role initially unwillingly and allowed Ellie to redeem him from his past, David is a predator and seeks instead to bring Ellie into his darkness. He fosters a false sense of trust by standing with her when infected attack and by putting on a friendly demeanour, but turns ferociously when she will not bend to his will. Joel's ferocity also comes out in this chapter, but in Ellie's defence when he recovers after the penicillin shot to find her missing. He viciously tortures David's men to find Ellie's location, showing us who he was in the past and what he is capable of. But after Ellie escapes David and kills him, Joel approaches her with a tenderness we haven't yet seen. David is evil in his own right, and perhaps the only character in the story who's unambiguously so, but his evil by contrast also shines a light on Joel's virtues, despite the violence of his past. In the aftermath of the winter chapter, Ellie is quiet and distant. Part of this is almost certainly the trauma of the events with David, but another part is the future and her role as the cure. Ellie hasn't talked about this much, on Joel's orders, but at the university she made light of it when calling out to see if any Fireflies were around.
Yoo-hoo! Fireflies! Here for mankind over here. Anyone?
But that didn't mean she was blasé about it.
How will they do it?
Do what?
Get the cure from me? You think it'll hurt?
No, we'll probably just draw some blood. It don't hurt.
I've gotten shots before. They vaccinated us at school. It sucked.
Now we can feel the weight of the burden placed on her. Her dream of flying and trying to save the plane but being unable to hints at the guilt driving her forward. We see how survivor's guilt affects Ellie more explicitly at the end of the game, but it's clear enough that it's weighing on her dreams. She also finds herself unable to talk about it, a reversal of roles with Joel, who is chattier than ever at this point, trying to pry from her what is wrong and talking of teaching her to play the guitar. Even as she has helped open him up, what she faces in her past and future is closing her down. The moment where the pair interact with a herd of giraffes is one of the most touching moments in the entire game, for a brief second restoring Ellie's mood and bringing her closer together with Joel. But it's the conversation that follows that speaks to how far each has come since they first met.
We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
What's the other option?
Go back to Tommy's. Just be done with this whole damn thing.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
Once again, we see what drives Ellie on. The belief that her life only has meaning if she can do this one thing, cleansing her of all that went before, the people lost, the people killed, and the monsters like David. Joel, meanwhile, pushes on not simply to survive or because it's the next objective anymore, but for her. This is emphasised not only by his insistence that he won't leave without Ellie, but also his willingness to talk about what happened after Sarah died, and to accept the photo that Ellie took from Tommy's. A trip through an infected-filled subway tunnel takes the pair to St. Mary's Hospital, where the Fireflies are. But on the way, Ellie nearly drowns, and as Joel tries to save her, 2 Firefly soldiers accost him and knock him out. Joel wakes up to the sight of Marlene, who tells him that her men resuscitated Ellie, but also that she's being prepped for surgery.
The hell you mean, surgery?
The doctors tell me the cordyceps, the growth inside her, has somehow mutated. It's why she's immune. Once they remove it, they'll be able to reverse engineer a vaccine. A vaccine.
But it grows all over the brain.
It does.
Find someone else.
There is no one else.
This moment, and Joel's subsequent decision to save Ellie, has been the subject of endless debate since the game first came out. I'm not going to settle it here. I'm not a utilitarian, so the idea of sacrificing one to save many isn't very convincing to me. The ends don't always justify the means. Not only that, rather than a noble gesture by the Fireflies, this is clearly something they believe will give them leverage to rebuild their organisation and shape the world according to their ideology. You can agree with that or not, but on top of that, there are too many unanswered questions about whether the Fireflies can even make a cure, or mass produce it, not to mention whether humanity, as represented by Pittsburgh, is worth saving, or whether communities like Jackson represent a better route to human salvation, without sacrificing innocents. But Joel is not weighing up the philosophical and political implications of all of this. He has a gun to his back, and is being marched out of the place where the girl he has grown to love, who helped him realise he was still capable of love, is about to die. Joel isn't facing the trolley problem, he's facing losing Sarah all over again with Ellie, at the hands of another man with a gun. He doesn't make a choice. He does the only thing he can with his back against the wall and Ellie's life on the line. He fights.
What are you doing? I won't let you take her. This is our future. Think of all the lives we'll save. Don't...
No! Fucking animal!
Terry, shut the hell up.
Come on, baby girl. I got you. I got you.
Where Joel does make a choice, and there's far more room to debate the rights and wrongs of, is in lying to Ellie once she wakes up. He no doubt feels the need to protect her, and himself, from the truth. Would she understand if he said that the Fireflies marched him out at gunpoint? Or he perhaps recognises what she's been going through, and doesn't want her to take on the guilt of any more spilled blood. And if she didn't understand, of course, he risked losing her if she didn't accept what he said. It's been said that Joel's choice was a purely selfish one. I don't agree with that. His actions at the hospital certainly weren't, but it no doubt played a part in the version of events that he chose to give Ellie afterwards. Before we move on to Jackson, it's worth noting that Marlene's insistence that Ellie would have wanted this is very likely true, but it doesn't change the fact that the reasons why are rooted in trauma and survivor's guilt, and the ethics of asking a minor to consent to such a thing is shaky at the very best without that. Perhaps Marlene truly believes what she's saying. Perhaps she's making herself believe it to assuage her guilt from her broken promise to Ellie's mother to keep her safe. In either event, Joel buys it about as much as Tess bought Robert's last desperate gambit in the QZ.
You just come after her.
As we reach Jackson, Ellie absently touches her bite wound before Joel tells her that they need to walk the rest of the way. The player from here on in controls Ellie, a clear indication that Joel's story has concluded. We've seen him lose everything at the beginning of the game, the hard closed-off man he became, and how Ellie pulled his walls down to show him he could love again. But Ellie's story is unfinished, from her point of view perhaps even denied a conclusion. There was no cure, no answer to the loss that she's faced, and now a distance between her and Joel. An unspoken distance, but one that we as the player feel in this short journey, as Joel happily talks about Sarah and his past in a way he wouldn't have before, whilst Ellie can only offer short and closed answers. Overlooking Jackson, the same place they were when Joel chose to stand by Ellie rather than hand her off to Tommy, and so chose to be her family, Ellie opens up about when she was bitten. This moment confirms what has been hinted at throughout, that Ellie's main motivator in providing the cure is survivor's guilt and atoning for the loss she has felt.
Back in Boston? Back when I was bitten? I wasn't alone. My best friend was there. And she got bit too. We didn't know what to do. So, she says, let's just wait it out. You know, we can be all poetic and just lose our minds together. I'm still waiting for my turn.
Ellie.
Her name was Riley, and she was the first to die. And then it was Tess. And then Sam.
Joel's response here is a reflection of the journey he has travelled, but also a suggestion of a different arc for Ellie than sacrificing herself to make up for the deaths of others. Though we don't know it yet, it's also something she will only really start to come to grips with at the very end of The Last of Us Part 2.
I struggled for a long time with surviving. And no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
Now, I know that's not what you want to hear right now.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
That moment represents a pretty much perfect ending to the story, with Joel's journey complete, but in the course of it so much left unresolved for Ellie. Does saying okay mean she believes him? No, the opposite if anything, but we won't know that for sure until the next game. When it was released, The Last of Us received universal acclaim, and it was the 5th highest rated PlayStation 3 game on Metacritic. It sold 1.3 million units within a week, being the biggest video game launch of 2013 to that point, and it was the 10th best-selling game of the year. The game won Best Newcomer and Best Storytelling at the Golden Joystick Awards, Best PlayStation Game and Best Voice Actor and Actress for Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson respectively at Spike VGX, Outstanding Achievement in Video Game Writing at the Writers Guild of America Awards, and Game of the Year from DICE, SXSW, the BAFTA Game Awards, and the Game Developers' Choice Awards, to list just some of its accolades. But beyond the critical reception and accolades, it would also spawn a media franchise that includes not only a DLC and remaster and remake of the initial game, but also a sequel which was equally critically acclaimed, even if it fell victim to the culture wars due to leaks before its release, and an upcoming multiplayer game. A 4-issue comic miniseries served as a prequel to the Left Behind DLC, and 2 tabletop games are in development. And, of course, we cannot forget the critically acclaimed TV series starring Pedro, Pascal and Bella Ramsey. This not only set a high standard for live-action video game adaptations, especially compared to what fans of Resident Evil, Halo or Doom have had foisted upon them, but introduced the characters and world to a whole new fandom beyond gamers, and in turn drove up interest in and sales of the games as well. As important as any of this, though, is the fandom that has emerged from the games. The Last of Us has inspired speed and challenge runners in the streamer and content creator space, of course, but also a legion of fan artists, virtual photographers and cosplayers. The world of The Last of Us, overgrown with deadly fungus, strewn with corpses and populated by hard, emotionally broken people killing to survive, has captured the imagination of so many, myself included. It's a world with far more stories to tell than the ones we've already gotten, and when we finally get those stories, in whatever medium they come, from games to TV to comics, there will be an audience ready to devour them.
Hi, I'm Opalink Cosplay, and for me, The Last of Us just brings out such an incredible creative community, you know, from artists to cosplayers to virtual photographers. Like, there's just such a strong and passionate fandom, and as an Ellie cosplayer myself, I just love how strong a female character Ellie is. She's so fun to portray, especially when you get to do it with other Last of Us cosplayers, so yeah, I just adore the fandom. I adore the creativity within it, and it's really exciting whenever anyone comes into it and brings their own flair.
The Last of Us to me is more than a video game. It's a part of my life and who I am as a person. It's a story showcasing our best intentions in dark and unprecedented times and what makes humanity question our actions and our consequences. It impacted me throughout, and it shows the difficult decisions that the story portrays, and that's one of its compelling traits. It's a story that sticks with you for a very long time, and one that pushed video game storytelling to another level. The fact that I have travelled the world to be a part of its progress and have a tattoo dedicated to the game says it all about how much it means to me personally. The Last of Us is not only one of the best and most powerful pieces of storytelling in gaming, but also in any entertainment medium.
Hi, I'm Ben, or Lioncat Cosplayer, and I'm one of the producers for Sports Productions, which was inspired by The Last of Us. It's something that we've created to bring a group of people together that are very passionate about the video games. Personally, for me, The Last of Us has become something of a crutch that I lent on in a particularly difficult time, and that introduced me to this whole community of talented, passionate cosplayers and in-game photographers and filmmakers, and it's something that will be with me for a very, very long time.
Nika, or also Beyond Believing cosplay. I cosplay Abby from The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us community is massive and very tight-knit. Everyone's incredibly passionate, and it's been really wonderful to be such a big part of it, especially in the last 3 years. People really come together, create so many cool things. People collect. There's a whole different group of people all over social media. Experiences while making our short film over the last 3 years has been even more visible because so many people have wanted to support. And I don't think I've ever been in any fandom or community that's this passionate about something. The game means so much to so many people, and it's been absolutely incredible to see. Especially the second game means a lot to me. Abby was one of the first women I saw where I saw someone who I want to look like and train to look like. And especially the support of people who think something similar. I just love the characters in these games, and there's so many other people who feel the same, and that community really shows up. It's been incredible. I love Last of Us fandom, even though things get heated. It's a really wonderful community.
The Last of Us was one of the very first games that taught me that video games were able to tell rich and complex stories that had nothing to envy from other types of media. Without it, I don't think my love for video games would have expanded the way it has, and it's also been a constant source of inspiration for me. And no matter what, how much time goes by, its story and characters will always mean a lot to me. So happy 10th anniversary and endure and survive.
I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. It's taken a lot of time and effort to pull together, and so thank you for stopping by and checking it out. Please give the video a like, as it really helps the channel out, and share it with others you think may be interested. If you want more content like this, then consider subscribing to the channel for all things The Last of Us, along with Resident Evil and horror gaming more broadly. Like the video that just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, so if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.